OpenAI has definitely pioneered the frontier of AI and LLMs. The ironic part of this is they had a mission to make AI open source and be a non-profit. And this company decided to open source their models. The next question is, then what do you do? I think the seed is there, the motivation is there, the trigger is there, but the do what part is not very clear. So the pitch deck that I had to raise probably have 10% of overlap of what I'm doing right now with around AI. And there's many reasons to it. There's a choice I make intentionally, and there's consequence I live with because there's no other choice.
I suppose we should begin with your background to some extent. You've had some leadership positions in significant globally recognized companies. Could you tell our audience a little bit about your corporate career and how you transitioned into entrepreneurship?
After school, after uni, I think like any other kid, I was back in New Zealand, a farmland, a land of sheep is more than the population. I felt it wasn't exciting enough. So I think you just want to get into a big corporate and then see what it has to offer. So for me, it was pretty straight up that like many of my classmates were taking a gap year and travel. I was like, no, I need to get into corporate. So I started to work for a local company in New Zealand, and for about 2 years, and then found an opportunity to work for a company called EDS. And it was one of the biggest American IT outsourcing company. And then it being acquired by HP. Then did that for a couple of years. Then I started to realize that I really have to move out of New Zealand to see what the world has to offer. Then I strategically planned annual leave of 7 weeks into Hong Kong and Shanghai. Lucky enough, within that period, I got a job with British Telecom. Start and then tried really hard. Also, made a few screw ups, but luckily, there was more learning than damage. Then got high hunted to Orange, part of French Telecom, managing a team of project managers for APAC. Again, they just wanted more, right? So then at the time I was like, that's like already maybe 10 years, which I already feel a bit sick. Maybe not 10, maybe close to 10. Then I wanted to just go to a small company to do more things, more sort of decision-making position. And that got a job with a company called Bluefish, and it was a boutique UK consulting firm. But as I've signed up my contract, they told me, "Oh, it's not us signing you, into this contract." I said, "Why?" Well, we're just being acquired by Vodafone. I said, "No way!" Again, just back into the corporate. And then being with them for 6 years, that was probably among all the Western companies that I've been work for, that was probably the most interesting 6 years. Head up innovation, head up consulting, build a whole consulting practice in Asia from scratch. Coming from an outsider where they see us a bit like you're blue, we are red, because we are acquired into the company, and then we kind of naturally inherited a lot of startup DNAs. That wasn't really a culture fit for the company at the time. Anyway, I enjoyed the time, and then 2020, Huawei came, as you know, like a massive Chinese company. I think for me that was a very interesting decision because 2020 there was a lot of scrutiny against the company. There was a lot of tension, not as much as today between China and the US. And I had, in my entire career, with the Western companies, I was like, I don't really understand why this has to happen where the technology should be, borderless, and it's more about innovation for the greater good. And there wasn't enough evidence for me, at least, to see that the acquisition was correct. So I joined them, and then that was 50% the reason. Obviously, the opportunity was good because they launched Huawei Cloud in 2019, and if you look at Huawei as an organization, it's like at the time it was 138 billion US revenue, like 3 times bigger than Vodafone, and Vodafone was second largest mobile company in the world. And I felt, wow, like if they have a 3 business group, one for enterprise, one for telco, one for consumer, average around 40 billion to 50 billion, and they're launching cloud as a 4th. And I couldn't see any better opportunity to build something in the billions with a larger organization, which is also a Chinese company, which I never had the experience with. So yeah, so joined them, and that has been, it's like going to an elevator. Like you've been you're on foot to climb up the ladders, right? On stairs from, I would say, the first 10, 12 years is like get up to level 10. on foot. 4 years with Huawei was literally a speed average was all the way up to 100. And the reason is like it was a new business. They don't really know how to do the stuff that they want to do overseas for the cloud and for the startup ecosystem. So I was in charge to build up the startup ecosystem for Huawei APAC to start with. We started in Singapore, expanded into Malaysia, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and Thailand. The entire thing become a global operation across like three different continents. Over a few thousand startups applied, and it's been a growing year on year. 450 year one, 850 year two, 1,500 year three, and it goes on. So I think that elevation in terms of exposure and the conversation that you have between the founders versus the CEO of a large company is very different. It's very dynamic. There's a lot of hands-on stuff. You're working with government agencies who are in charge of ecosystem. That's not something I had experience with. So yeah, that was really, really great experience. Obviously, not without its challenge and everything else. I think at the end of the day, corporate has its own sort of cadence and culture, and Huawei by far is the most unique corporate that I've ever worked by culture and by the way they operate.
You mentioned you worked for a few Western companies before transitioning to Huawei. Could you highlight for our global audience what some of the top level differences are working for a Chinese company versus working for a French, British, or Western company?
That's a great question. I think the Western culture is similar in its nature. I mean, being political correct, I'm not saying one is democratic, one is not, but it has this Western management culture built up for years, right? So for me, whether it's a US company or the British company or French company, you don't really feel that difference. The Chinese company, I guess if you start from China and build your way up, you also get used to it. But I'm Chinese by birth, and then I'm never really worked in China after school. So I see the difference. And I think it probably comes down to the culture difference. Number one, the Chinese culture is a little bit more group, like a group decision. The leaders make the decision. The subordinates tend to be on the consent mode more. That's not entirely true anymore, but it's kind of still being the practice. I think every single organization, I think one thing I don't see difference between the Western company and Chinese company is they all have politics. They just had it in a different, it presented in a different way. I mean, because at the end of the day, people have their agenda, they have their own KPIs. And any large organization is all sort of mix and match KPI, sometimes collaboration, sometimes competition. The way they handle it is very differently. And I think in Huawei it has a culture of they would do whatever it takes to get it done. And then there's certain expectation, like hardship. Hardship meaning like making life sacrifices if you have to for customers' service. But that's not the value that a lot of Western company would be advocating. And that's one example. And then it's so I think there's a lot of trivial things, but I think and also there's difference if you're like a foreigners versus Chinese, you might fail or might be treated differently.
Do you think that Huawei was treated fairly? It seems like around 2020, maybe 2021, their kind of global market ambitions seem to be controversial in a political sense, and that maybe there were penalties placed against them that might not have been placed against other companies. And I'm curious from your perspective, being in Huawei in Asia, what's your perception of the way that things went in 2020, 2021?
Honestly, this is my personal opinion. I'm no longer with the company. I don't represent Huawei in any way or form. So don't, this is just me. And I've been with a Western company more than in a China company. So I believe I do have a pretty balanced view. Obviously, there are certain accusations. Huawei, they have evidence, and certain they are more ideology, I believe, or politics. I think as any innovation, I want to talk about one thing, right? So a lot of people talk about China being a copycat, especially when it comes to technology and innovation, which is true to many extent. I was listening to Travis, ex-CEO of Uber or founder of Uber. I know for a fact because a friend of mine was number three in Uber China. When they launched Uber in China, it was the first, right? Obviously, within about a few months. It's not the first. There's a local China companies operating in the same space. But they kind of the first international that really got a lot of experience and elevate a lot of user experience from the app perspective. So by far, they're really leading the innovation from how they service the user, service the drivers, and then you always find the competition is like catching up really quickly. I think he mentioned that they have 500 people in in California, like a China land that making all this innovation. They're all Chinese, like so they have to compete locally by the local mindset, although they're in the US. And then what they realize is, these people, the pace they copy is amazing. And what happens after you've been copying somebody for so long? The margin of innovation difference and getting less and less. At some point, this gap is closed, right? And then what happened is they run out of idea to copy. Then they start innovate. And then this gap start getting bigger and bigger. And the same thing happened to Huawei as well. Like, company established in 1987 with 3,000 USD by a guy, although ex-military, but we don't judge people from the background, and start selling telephones. And then he had to make a living, so he started selling more than the telephones, and maybe modems, and then start selling telecom equipment and all that. Yes, you'll copy certain technologies, so as everybody does. Let's not even go into Microsoft and everybody else, but it's not the reason to sort of stop a company. I think I think that's number one. And number two, I felt the company is changing. They're launching different services. Many, not really like the 5G. They were the innovators, right? And then why publish someone who is pushing the boundary because of certain things that you couldn't, all the evidence. So without going into the politics, I just felt it wasn't. Sorry, the question. What was the question again?
Well, do you think that it was fair competition that Huawei was facing with, let's say, Western markets?
It's very fair to start with because nobody knows the company. Like I said, 3,000 USC, 1987. Now, I think this year there will probably be another because they shrinked because they got massive hit from 138 billion US to less than a billion in 3 years' time. I think 2022 was pretty low. I mean, all these are public records. And then it started come back. I think they now, with the, automobile, smartphone is catching up again. Enterprise is doing well. I think they'll probably come back, if not bigger than before. So it's definitely fair in the sense of they came out as a company like anybody else. They definitely have a certain advantage now because the support of China government. On the flip side, they have everything against them outside of China. So is that fair? I guess it depends on how you look at it. The company doesn't want to be seen as national heroes. They've been put on the podium not by choice, because many times the founder, Mr. Ren, said, I love the U.S. I know people like Apple and everybody else will learn from them. We, in a way, they like worship them, and I think Huawei have spent the first company spent I think it was about $1 billion on IBM, also consulting to build up the whole system, like operational wise, right? And there's a lot of terms that Huawei using is still very much IBM. So yeah, I think it's been fair, from beginning to the end. They definitely struggle overseas, and they're pretty strong in China. Let's see.
You brought up the topic of fast copying and how now there's clearly innovation happening beyond merely copying someone else's design. But I think that's an interesting concept that I've had evolving feelings about. Growing up in the US, when I heard from mainstream media or something that Japan or Korea or China or some other highly advanced, let's say, competitor was quote unquote copying, there's like this identity kind of ego bruise that happens where you feel that someone else is getting glory more easily than like you would get glory, which is kind of ironic because you're not actually the one doing the thing, but you identify with the gold medal or the flag or something when it serves you. And as I lived a little bit more and lived in different places a little bit more, I started to look at like humans as in nature as just competition in the jungle. And to an extent, anything is fair if it works. So, what is copying? It's basically demonstrating that something works and then forcing you to innovate or accept that you'll be passed, which is essentially the same laws as nature. So, in a way, I think There's a desire to relax or at least conserve energy, and a desire to like save status. So let's say you're an Olympic athlete and you're racing or practicing to race for a gold medal. After you win your gold medal, and this would be getting a patent or something like that, you want to relax, you want to rest, you want to get as many ad or sponsorship deals as you can, or royalties or residuals from your patent. And then to have someone that's right there, like right away, it's like, oh, I can't relax for a year. I can relax maybe for one day, 1 minute. So I think if you zoom out, it's actually a value add. And also, like you brought up, well, you mentioned, we're all kind of copying anyway. Like I didn't invent English that I'm speaking to you with now. I didn't invent like the clothing that I'm wearing. I mean, there's so many different ways. And then when you get into like high tech or any kind of large development, like an airplane or what have you, it's kind of borderless anyway. You have, researchers and scientists from China and France and all over coming together. And it's not really like any nation state or ideology or religion or whatever has a monopoly on life or creativity. So it's more, I think, an ego sort of relationship. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, firstly, I think I think any acquisition without science behind it is opinion. So I would say it's not like you have a golden standard to say right or well. No, I mean obviously where there's copyright, so you should. I mean, so let me retract. So there's copyright, there's IP, then you shouldn't by default to copy. That's when you infringe people's IP if there is clear evidence. But if you say I am doing something just like you, and then you say I'm copying you, then it becomes your opinion. And then if the way I do it is better than you, then it becomes innovation. And if that innovation drives more value for the customer, it certainly is a good thing. So that's my simple view at this. Like, does it create value or better value for the same group of people? If I'm doing a better job and serving the better people better without infringing your IP, if you have one, then I don't see that's a problem.
So I'm curious with IP, what do you think is the benefit of preserving and defending IP? Do you think that it incentivizes people to try hard at the chance that they might get a patent and then
Yeah, yeah. That's an excellent question. I mean, lots of people fighting for it, fighting against it. Lots of people take a very different mentality at it. Like, I welcome you copying us. Now, Elon Musk is a great example. He just open source the whole Tesla code. I say, well, so the way you keep your competitive advantage is by this pace of your innovation, not by how rigid you stay on innovation and keep people away from getting to this secret sauce, right? So I think personally, I felt that is better approach. By the way, your IP always has a timestamp as well. So I'll keep it simple. I think that's my sense. Obviously, lots of people invest a lot of time and effort to get somewhere in the medical field. Look, I mean, right now the hottest topic around the world is this deep seek trump the whole world, say that I'm doing everything the same but at one of 600%, like a fraction of your cost, open AI. And what happened now, like Alibaba like launched their own model like a week later. I saw news today that Baidu, like the China version of Google, basically made their chatbot for free. So who is the benefiting from this? All of us were benefiting from this. But Sam has a point, like, and I do concur this. If you travel in darkness, not knowing what's at the other side of darkness, or if there's anything at the other side of darkness, you travel with a lot more caution and fear. You travel slowly. But if you do know across darkness, there's a light. If I just keep on heading this direction, then you go full speed, right? So I think OpenAI has definitely pioneered the frontier of AI and LLMs. We have huge respect. I guess the ironic part of this is they had a mission to to make AI open source and being a nonprofit. And now they turn to a profit-driven organization. And this company decided open source their models and challenging OpenAI. I just found that it's quite ironic to see what you know.
I think it's a win-win for everyone. I think it's going to help OpenAI become a better company. I think both OpenAI and DeepSeek have their legacies set. You know, they're both, I think, going to go down in history as pioneers. DeepSeek's like inference model and the way that they did things, I understand, is brilliant. So, and it's just going to open up the competitions, bring down the costs of compute, and we're all going to be using it more. I'm really excited about the changes that we may see this this decade. It's only a few years left of this decade, but I think it'll be monumental. I think the rest of this decade, like 5 years, I think we'll possibly see as much innovation as the entire 20th century in just a few years.
Yeah, 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 100% agree.
So I'd like to, at this point, talk about your pivot then from a sounds like a very successful, very respectable corporate career into starting Ground AI and entrepreneurship. What led to you leaving that supposed security of corporate life and going on the entrepreneur path?
The idea of being an entrepreneur is deeply seated from the family. I think family inheritance. My dad, i.e., being entrepreneur, obviously in the traditional brick and mortar business, running a restaurant, and then grow that to a hospitality group. The question becomes, when do you let that seed grow and decide to do something with it? So I think the thought is always there. The motivation is, I always remember the school, like I'm a graduation ceremony back in New Zealand. I think our faculty had said about life, biggest risk in life is not taking any risk. I think that struck me profoundly while I was waiting, queuing off the stage and going up, collecting my certification, all that. And I always think about this, like, I know there's a seed. If I never let it out, what would it be if I'm on my deathbed? Obviously, it will be regrets. So I think that was the main motivation. The next question will be the trigger. So what is the trigger to let go? So I think the last 4 years of experience in Huawei, mostly being advocating startups and advising them, investing in them, working along with them, made you see what you didn't see. Basically, you start to understand the SOP of what it takes to build a company. Then really, like, the next question is, then what do you do? Like, do what? So I think at Ground AI, to be completely honest, I think the seed is there, the motivation is there, the trigger is there, but the do what part is not very clear. So the pitch deck that I had to raise my angel round is probably have 10% of overlap of what I'm doing right now with Ground AI, and there's many reasons to it. There's a choice I make intentionally, and there's consequence I live with because there's no other choice. So I think that kind of pushed me to be very humbled, be a lot more down to earth, to a point, like, say if you're a guy just rise up to 100, then you decide to jump, and then you jump off, you lost everything, your spotlights, your job security, your comfort. You kind of know, but you haven't done it. Therefore, you don't know how it felt. And this jump from the 100 smashed into a floor or on Earth, actually going under the Earth because the impact is so big, the velocity is so fast. Then it was like a huge transition, and but you end up seeing something different. You end up seeing another micro ecosystem underneath the Earth. People operate differently, at a different pace and different cost. Then you rise up, then you see the world. I see the world so different now, because what I have access versus what I can contribute. Number one, I have a lot more less access to the stuff that I used to. Secondly, but I become more solid about the stuff I build because it's all me. I used to think I'm great. Like everybody corporate, once they hit the C level, they think they are pretty amazing. And it's true, like, because let's face it, right? How many C levels can you be if you work for a company of hundreds and thousands? So it is definitely not no small feat. But by far and large, right, I feel the success of what you build in the organization is still to the credit of organization. In a very few individual, I would say in a company is indispensable. So to that, if you build your own company, that's all to you. You know, you're yeah. So you suffer, you push, and you win. There's no safety net. You weight everything on your shoulder, and then you push forward.
Could you define audience led growth and how it differs from product led strategies?
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of our slogan, audience-led growth. I think that the way I see business grow, traditionally, you're like especially in a large company who are selling a bigger ticket services or product, it's all very sales-led, meaning that you have a business development manager or sales rep who's selling a product, they building a pipeline, and they close your pipelines. Then the company will grow as you close more deals. Then the SaaS wave came in, I think in early 2000. Then it become product led growth because you can do something very niche at in scale by just focus on the product. So you don't need to have a sales rep. You just laser focus on building a great product. And that has been the engine for a lot of tech companies, even until now. And what's happening now is people saying the SaaS business is dying. Why? Because there's AI services coming in, or agentic services coming in. And if you look at what's the difference between the software and agentic service, fundamentally I see it is one is software, one is a service. And the difference between software and the service, people have to learn the software. You as a service provider learn me, like you service me. That's why agentic services sound so attractive because it's much more intuitively designed to work for us, which is why this AI agentic service is catching everyone's attention. But on this note, everyone is different. So you could imagine today, if you to build the same product as opposed to 2020, you would do it in one tenth of the speed or one tenth the price because with the models, everyone becomes a 10x of whatever, right? But your customer, the amount of customers is still the same. Like you still have this hundred of thousand or tens of thousands customers. So what happened is your audience is the number one thing right now because and the competition intensifies. So whoever gets the audience is ultimately, I wouldn't say product is not important, but I think it's just getting it's become a lot more important. So that's what we do at Ground AI. Like we talk about audience-led growth, not to say product is not important, but you need to find a way to find your audience, find their problems, then build a product around it. Most of startups will start with idea, build a product, then find no customer buy them. So I'm flipping this. Find your audience, find their problem, then build a product. And then they will buy it.
What are some of the top mistakes that businesses make when trying to expand into Asia? I guess Western businesses trying to expand into Asia, because you've seen kind of both sides.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm gonna give you a classic example. Like Vodafone back in I think it was prior 2000, they bought I think they bought Japan Telecom. I can't remember one of the telco they bought. Then they operate as a Vodafone brand. And the Vodafone brand does not exist in Japan anymore. And you know who acquired them?
SoftBank?
Yes. So SoftBank was built on the legacy of Vodafone. Can you believe that? This is a company who is founding Stargate, Miss Sun. Like, and why? Because Vodafone at the time thought the way I will make my mobile, the way I will work with my customer is so good in the UK. Everyone else should just copy. When I was in Vodafone, like they say this, we have this Newbury uh, mentality and vision. And so Newbury is this city in the UK and where the Vodafone HQ is. So I think a lot of Western companies coming to Asia have this mentality of this is how I see it. Um, I think I'm entitled to teach you what's right or wrong. I think that probably been traditionally the number one challenge to basically have to localize to find your competitive edge. Um, so I think now for the younger generation, um, especially for the startups or the US or from Europe, Asia as a region, um, it's very interesting. You find people are more easy to work with. They are nice. They're not as it depends on the country. Firstly, like Asia is not homogeneous. Like if you look just at Southeast Asia, there's like um, there's like at least 20 different countries, right? And then the top 10 economy uh, together maybe add up to 7 billion people. Um, I, I don't, I'm sorry, not 7 billion. I think I'm definitely speaking nonsense. I can't remember the
Like
exact
half
number,
of
but
the
you'll
global
find it.
population, though. Yeah,
Yeah,
point
exactly. It's a
taken.
a large population, but they speak different language, and the mentality is very different. Like Singapore is a lot more Western, the Asian for dummies for a lot of Westerners. Same as Hong Kong. If you go to Thailand, people are very nice, but not as spoken as them. Indonesia, very, very young crowd, more driven than any other Southeast Asia countries. China, obviously, is becoming a lot more confident, a lot more international. Japan still, as always, closed, very difficult to crack in. But once you're cracked in, you earn the trust, then you can do business for a long time. So for this part of the world, you got to really play that long game. And unfortunately, the entry cost is not that high, but the ticket to survive and to live on, it could be a bit expensive. Depends on how quickly you can adapt.
You mentioned the diversity of such a large population and region. Are there any specific cultural do's and don'ts when negotiating deals in Asia?
From whose perspective?
From the Western perspective, is there anything, since you kind of have understanding of both sides, is there anything that like a Westerner should keep in mind when negotiating deals in the Asian cultural context? Is the negotiation similar or is it different?
Well, don't take the word for it. They're smiling at you does not mean they like you or like your product. Not you, but I say the product. Donald Trump said the art of making a deal. There's certainly an art of making deals with Asians, and each country is different. So there's no easy way to explain this concept, and it's more and it depends. Like if you're SLG or PLG or ALG, you were exposed to different level of negotiation. So I guess your question is probably more towards to the sales-led growth, where you're trying to sell something to your customers. I felt there's no perfect answer to this because each country is different. But I think the main thing will be make sure they felt there's a value that they get from you where they couldn't get somewhere else at a fair price. I think that's really
The challenge I have as a Westerner is showing respect without signaling weakness. Because there's some things in Western context that we're taught to be deferential, like opening the doors or smiling to strangers, that sometimes don't translate and I think could be taken in a different way. So I was curious, since you've spent time in like both cultures, broadly speaking, East and West, how do you negotiate like showing respect while still demonstrating strength? Because if you like, I'll give you an example also when it comes to negotiation in like a street market in Thailand. I was surprised that it can actually be seen as disrespectful to pay the asking price. I'm not saying it's like this everywhere. I just mean in terms of this example, it's actually shows respect. If someone says this is $5, you should say, I'll give you two. And they say, oh, two's cheap, like four, and you're like, four, it's too expensive. Three, like no. And then you settle on 350 or something. That's like kind of intimate, shows mutual respect. There's like a better kind of dynamic, and that's specific to cultures where there is that negotiation. But if you don't know the cultural kind of details, they might not respect you, and that would make negotiation difficult. And then if you come across as arrogant, then they also don't respect you. Their egos may be upset. And so that also, so for me, it's a delicate balance between, I guess, having confidence and showing respect. Does that make sense?
I think that confidence is about being aware, like contextual awareness of, what's their practice versus yours, and I guess work collaboratively to get to that winning prize, which they're willing to pay. Sorry, they're willing to take, and you're willing to pay. Yeah, very much so.
Could you walk us through your approach to identifying and securing the right partnerships for growth?
So at Ground AI, I work with quite a few partners. I call them partners because they're part of my business value chain. Lots of them are based out of India, a few based out of China. And because you no longer have the podium where like Huawei can just get hundreds and thousands of people come to you, and you can afford to do that. We are now don't have I don't have that anymore. I mean, for example, India is a very interesting country. I start to really that's one example I can always say. I never really worked deeply with business in India. Um, we now have worked with maybe 4 or 5 companies already in India who are contribute to part of our service and value chain, be service companies and software companies, all that. I found for them, you just, you cannot take whatever they say on the face value out of it, because they all sound fantastic. Maybe they say it for the sake of my ear, or maybe they really get what it takes, but you don't know that until you try. So I think the way right now for me is find out, like I'm open to work with a lot of partners, but I'm trying to figure out what is the most efficient way of understand and verify if they have what it takes to build to create value for me as well as for themselves. And you have to allow certain room for error because they tend to overpromise. So you got to see, is that because they lack of trying, or is it just because they were too bluffing? And then you look at what I have, because at the end of the day, what you ask can go with what you can pay for. So for me, like the way I would identify a partner is number one, have some understanding, like do your own research, work with them, find a way to let them give them a bit of space, and then adjust. And if they are truly what a partner, then time will tell. And we don't really have a lot of time, so it's normally like within a month or two you will know, and then you make a decision to move on. For the ones who stay, like we are now 7 months. A lot of partners, like at least two of them, been with us for 6 months, and then you have your up and downs. And sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you play the hard game, like you got really pissed off. Yesterday, I was got really pissed off, and you just have to tell them, look, this is not. Like I'm giving my heart and soul in this business. I see you as a partner. If you're not coming to the other on par, then why are we doing this together? Because I certainly don't have a longevity if I don't make living out of this, and same to you. And then they will respect you. They will say, okay, we adjusted, and they give them a bit of room, and they will adjust. Yeah, now it's like the move speed is the number one thing to keep us going. Yeah, because you are kind of doing something new, and you don't know if it works. So the less cost, the more effectively you can verify what you're doing, is that kind of winning formula to create a success edge.
And what is on the horizon for Ground AI? What is it that you're looking to do this year in 2025?
So there are 3 parts of my business. We start with launching a content business. So AI Business Asia is a fastest growing content platform, which we publish a lot of articles. We have our own newsletters, and it's very focused on using AI to solve business problems. Now we talk about AI models, AI apps, and having certain AI courses. And a lot to do is around how the growth techniques. How do you find your audience? How do you improve your conversion rate? So it's very growth centric. and with deep understanding of AI. So that's the first part. And then based on that, then we start offering services to help. And we're very B2B focused, like B2B SaaS company to go beyond the home market, whether from China or from US or from Indonesia or Singapore, go beyond. And then the last one is this platform that we have developed to deliver that growth. So it's right now it's quite service led, and the reason I like that is firstly we already have audience, so we have like 10,000 business subscribers that can buy into like could be our potential clients, and secondly our service arm is quite tailored to B2B SaaS companies. And a lot of B2B SaaS companies, and we're very, and then for their growth, and growth is such a big term, right? And you couldn't say I'm 100% responsible for your growth because it's just gonna make you nuts. So we're very focused at sales and marketing. But how do you? The question is like if you know where the audience is, right? So if I'm a company selling to like my average ticket size is 10K, then you versus 100, your audience is very different. So we now for example focus on LinkedIn to help our customers to find their clients. So how do you get the people to buy in to your brand or buy into your product? LinkedIn have a very different character than Twitter and then Reddit. You kind of need more higher profile, like a bit more professional. Then the way you tell the world, tell your story, tell your product story, it's very different than the way you're telling that story in on X. So X is a bit more relaxed. And then if you move on to another platform like Reddit, you don't even need a profile because it's all about the contents that you talk about. So we understand that deeply, and then it's about helping the client to create the best story to resonate with the audience at a different platform. And I think and that's not rocket science. I think anybody spend enough time to understand social media would say, I get it. So where's the key differentiator? I would say the key differentiator is how do you take that know-how and integrate it into your sales and marketing process? So, we talk about like CRM integration. People using different tools, be HubSpot, be Apollo. You'll always find there is a gap. And this is where, for example, Apollo is a great marketing tool or sales automation, outbound outreach. And then the strengths could be they have a lot of data points, but they don't have a lot of data points in Asia as much as they're in the US. Certainly the way it works in terms of workflow does not work for my business because, for example, if I'm a small SaaS company versus a big SaaS company, my entire sales approach is different. You know what I mean? Like I need to go find people who are spending $50 versus $500,000 is very different. So, we have to create a account-based marketing for large organization, which is more about penetration of large accounts, percentage by percentage, than getting leads, hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands. And all of that, no software can does it today. I wrote an article about why all AI SaaS software charges $20 a month. It's because it only worth $20. The only reason it worth only $20 because the value it creates is only worth $20. Things like ChatGPT and Perplexity, obviously the value is getting bigger. So they launch deep search, so they could charge 200. But that's also because they're getting more sophisticated. So what I'm saying is, at a workflow level, they still need a lot of service triage to make the software works. And that's why we're building this service arm to help our solution to be better fit instead of being you fitting our solution. I think that's one of the key trends I see, which is the transition of software as a service to service as in software. So you basically build a service which translates into a workflow. Now you productize the workflow. In that process, the benefit will be you can demand for higher revenue, much deeper understanding at workflow level. Then it's about building that workflow into a product, better the product to make it more scalable.
So, for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business owners that want to work with you, where should they go? You've got a great newsletter that I'm subscribed to, and they can go to aibusinessasia.beehive.com. Is there anywhere else that people can go to connect with you or to sign up?
Yeah, I mean, we have aibusinessasia.com, so they can go to or Google AI Business Asia. On our homepage, you can subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to my podcast channels. There's a list of services. We're about to launch our product publicly in March. Right now, we use it for ourselves. We use it for our clients, like under the beta version. So I'm expecting to launch that product, the automation tool and platform, in March. You can always find me on LinkedIn, search my name, Nuo Jiang. And we are, again, like very small company, like size of, we just hired 3 full-time in India yesterday. So growing, and love to be part of your growth journey.
Excellent. Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you today, and I look forward to keeping in touch and comparing notes in 2026.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully we will be in a much bigger podium.
Great. Thanks, Leo.
No problem.